Welcome to Know Where to Hide. Well, July 1st has come and gone, and with it, certain laws have, come into being. They took effect on July 1st, one of them being Idaho's new library law, which protects kids from harmful materials that are being placed within their reach in the public library. As expected, there have been some pretty public freakouts, and we're going to show you the example of what those look like, as well as the justification behind them, and then explain why they're dead wrong. Coming up next.
Press club are biased all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Once again, welcome to Know Where to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde. Twice a week, I get to sit down and go through some of the news stories that deserve a little bit closer coverage and maybe a little less spun coverage than what you're likely to get through Idaho's legacy media outlets. It's been a tough week for folks on the political left. A number of Supreme Court decisions have come down that have left them, crying in their Cheerios over presumably their ability to control other people. But one of the big things that has them upset, at least in the state of Idaho, is the fact that we now have standards within our public libraries, as well as private libraries and school libraries, that require that books that depict harmful material are not supposed to be within reach of children, not supposed to be placed within the children's section. They can be challenged if they are found there. The libraries are expected to act on that. They have a window of time in which they're supposed to take care of it. If they don't, they could face a $250 fine. Now, that seems pretty reasonable. Okay, it's not going to break the bank, but it also puts enough teeth into the law saying there are some things that we really don't want to put within reach of children. So that seems like a pretty sound idea, right? Well, it depends on who you ask. Let's take, for instance, a look at what KTVB has to say about it. What's this? Free people read freely. New Idaho library law draws criticism on the day that it goes into effect. Well, yes, it's drawing criticism, but you have to ask, who is it drawing criticism from? Is it drawing criticism from normal people who aren't child sex fiends? Not so much. How about people who think that it's imperative that somehow we instruct children in the intricacies of some kind of deviant sex play and, of course, get them to question their gender? Oh, it's an outrage. It's terrible. In fact, they call it a book ban, which is totally wrong. But let's delve into the article a little bit, and then we'll pick this apart and show you where they're coming at this not only logically from a wrong point of view, but morally from a wrong point of view. So apparently, a couple of days ago, there were demonstrations at North Idaho libraries regarding Idaho's new law regulating books that may be considered, and here are the air quotes, the scare quotes, harmful materials, which went into effect on July 1st. The legislation, the story tells us, could impact how libraries operate, specifically when it comes to children. Now, the Library Alliance of North Idaho is one of the groups rallying against the state's new library law, as well as showing their support for local libraries. Now, there's a very interesting twist that goes on here. Well, we're just trying to support our libraries, as if the people who are saying, hey, don't put that garbage in front of young eyes, stop trying to steal innocence from children, is somehow perceived as you're against reading. You want us to go back to drawing pictures on a cave wall somewhere and not read and write. It really comes down to that kind of an argument. Hence, the free people read freely. But children are not in full exercise of their rights, at least not starting out. They grow into it, but it's about age 18 that we say, okay, you're old enough to know the difference between what's real, what isn't, to engage in contract and so forth. But we specifically limit how much a child is able to exercise his or her rights prior to that time. This is why we don't sell them tobacco, we don't sell them liquor, we don't encourage them to partake of adult materials. Unless, of course, it's under the guise of, well, it's just education, which, by the way, that was under the banner under which this news story was published. Now, this new Idaho law, according to KTVB, allows the public to file a complaint with the library requesting a book they find inappropriate for the children's section to be moved. You notice that's not banned. It's saying take it out of the children's section and put it somewhere where, look, if an adult wants to reach it, even if it's an older child, a teenager, fine. But take it out of the kids section and don't put it in front of young eyes that aren't quite ready for that. So the way the law works is first the library board has 30 days to formally receive the request. Then once it's received, the clock starts on another 30 days for the library board to review the book and act on the request. Now that's 60 days in which they can take action. If the book isn't removed, well, then people can sue the library and staff for $250 as well as other damages. Those rallying against the new law believe that this takes away parental rights and adds unnecessary work for libraries. They say the law impacts both public libraries as well as those at public and private schools. But why is there no question as to whether or not some materials really shouldn't be in front of kids in the first place? You know that there are places where they would draw the line. Wait a minute, is that a Confederate flag? Why, there's no way a child should see that. But, detailed instruction on how to perform oral sex on one another. Oh, well, that's just fine. In fact, that's the healthiest thing we could possibly show them, or at least that seems to be how the thinking goes. Now, the Coeur d'Alene Public Library said it had made minor changes in preparation for the new law. They said they already had a material review policy, form, and procedure in place. However, they modified each of them to match the process outlined in the new statute. And I say good for them for following the law. That's better than the defiance tone that some are taking. On Monday, the Library Alliance of North Idaho invited the public to sign thank you cards that will be delivered to librarians. Demonstrations are also going on at branches in Hayden, Post Falls, Spirit Lake, and others. Now, one of the commenters on this said, our hope first is first that our librarians and library workers know that we support them and appreciate the work that they do, and we trust them. We trust them to make decisions about what material should be in our books. Over parents? I mean, how far do we trust them? And look, I think most librarians are not inclined to abuse that privilege of deciding what is appropriate and what isn't. But there are some things that really don't need to be put in front of children's eyes. So this is not about we need to ban a certain book because this is a forbidden thought. If you want that, you need to talk to the Coeur d'Alene City Council, which just last night passed a hate speech law, which talk about a solution looking for a problem. There it is. Little contrived outrage, and now any crime they want, they can add a hate speech enhancement on it, which is all about policing what people think. Now, that's a much greater threat to free speech and freedom itself than putting appropriate material within reach of children or keeping inappropriate material out of reach of children. Now, what do we mean by inappropriate material? I know that, there's some sophists out there. Well, the Bible talks about lots of inappropriate stuff. Oh, yes, it does. But does it do it from an advocacy point of view? No? Okay, then maybe shut up. Okay, I'm trying to be polite about it, but maybe you're talking out of, I hope you stood up before you started talking. So take a look at this. This is one example from one book. Again, the point here is this is aimed at a child audience. This is pointed toward kids. Oh, look, it's the lowdown on anal sex, and it goes into great detail about, whatever the author wants them to know. Again, why does this need to be in front of kids? I don't know. Here are examples from other books. Genderqueer is one of them. This book is Gay is another. Let's talk about it. Flamer. These are very graphic depictions of sexual acts being performed, which, some people, that's their thing. They really want to look at that kind of stuff. Okay, great. But children, there are boundaries of what's appropriate and what isn't appropriate. And to put that in front of kids or to put it where it's accessible by kids, it's not a matter of, we're just trying to educate them about diverse points of view. Although you'll see that Idaho Democrats really believe, no, we just want kids to learn about diverse points of view. Okay, how far are you willing to take that? The diverse points of view that I've just depicted here for you, those seem more like, if we can't be innocent, then neither can you. But let's move on. Another article here from KTVB. Again, this is, we are standing up to protect our libraries. Oh, protect them from what? This is Idaho Democrats calling for a statewide day of action, which they held the other day. Now, this move comes after the library book bounty. What a scary way to describe it. They're putting a bounty out there on books in the library. Well, they're putting an enforceable statute there that says, if you knowingly put this material within reach of kids, you're going to have to pay a price for it. But let's see what protecting the kids is all about, at least to the Idaho Democrats. Idaho Democrats are holding a statewide day of action over the library bounty bill. I like it that it's at least in quotation marks. That was probably a good call. Or House Bill 710, a bill many, but certainly not all, have called overreaching. It went into effect on July 1st and allows anyone to challenge a book in public and school libraries. Now, Idaho Democratic Party Chair Lauren Necochea says the library book bounty passed by Republican politicians is a direct attack on our freedom to make decisions for ourselves and our families, and apparently for other people's children as well. We are standing up to protect our libraries from the book banners, support our librarians, and ensure that our children have access to a broad range of books that reflect diverse perspectives, which, as you saw before, includes quite a number of very interesting and unnatural sex acts for some reason. Now, let's break this down a little bit. Protecting our library from book banners. In any way, does this prevent or punish someone for going out and buying that book for themselves? In other words, could they go on Amazon and find the book if they want it? No, go ahead, answer. If the answer is yes, then it's not a ban, is it? Could they go to a bookstore and find it? Absolutely, they could. In fact, for that matter, could these books be found in other sections of the library? You can say it. It's okay. We all know what the answer is. In many cases, the answer is yes. All this does is establish a boundary as to where it is appropriate for this material to be placed and where it isn't. Putting that in front of young children is not an appropriate place. Oh, and the thing about we're trying to protect librarians, it's not the librarians that are under attack. It's whomever, whether they be librarian or whether they just be some kind of child sex fiend activist who wants to put this kind of material in front of young eyes. That's who we need to protect kids from. Predatory sexual behavior. Plain and simple. It's, the idea that somehow this is impinging on freedom of speech and it's impinging on people's ability to make decisions for themselves. These books are readily available for anyone who wants to get them. If that's your kink, you can go and get it. But you should not be putting it in front of kids and trying to pretend or trying to instruct kids that somehow this is a good thing. And the lengths that they will go to in order to try to promote this and say, well, there are other books that talk about bad things too. For instance, this one just blew my mind. Here we have, look, they used a Bible verse, Ezekiel 23:20. Now this is talking about lust. And it's not talking about it from, hey, it's a good idea. Maybe you should experiment with this. It's condemning it and warning people that lust is actually a very destructive thing. In fact, isn't it one of the deadly sins? I believe hearing that somewhere. I remember hearing that once upon a time. Seems like maybe even a city or two, Sodom and Gomorrah, for instance, were destroyed because of their absolute seeking after perversion at any cost. So I get it that it's tough for people who have thrown their full weight behind the idea that we have to push this on children because, frankly, the people who are pushing the sexual identity movement, generally they're pushing the kind of relationships that will not result in having children themselves. Whether it's through same-sex relationships that physically, naturally cannot create children, or whether it's encouraging children to transition and surgically mutilate themselves or mutilate themselves through hormone therapy to where they are now rendered infertile. Yeah, it seems to stop the ability to, perpetuate the human race. So what else can they do? Well, they can recruit. So sorry to say that this closes one door, one possible avenue where these predatory recruiters might exploit young minds and confuse them into participating or, jumping aboard, the freak wagon. By the way, this doesn't describe a lot of people who would describe themselves as part of the LGBT community. They are appalled at the activism and especially the activism aimed at children. They see it for what it is. It's a crime against humanity. Now, when you're dealing with adults, that's a totally different thing. But, the big objection here is how dare you say no? You're trying to deny that these diverse points of view exist. Excuse me, but did your eyes open or did you hear a single thing or see a single thing for the last 4 weeks? We had an entire month of nonstop celebration and flag waving and pride festivals and frankly, disgusting behavior, depending on which locale you attended, your local pride event. They're pushing the envelope. Every year it gets a little bit more bawdy, a little more just disgusting for the sake of if we can't be innocent, then neither can you. And of course the refrain is, well, you can't impose morality. Well, here's a cartoon that actually explains it. Government can't impose morality. Yes. Stop hate crimes, transgender restrooms, Black Lives Matter. Oh, what's that flag in the background? Trans rights or human rights. Okay, you get the picture. There is a definite type of morality that is being imposed. And it's the kind of morality that normal people, and I don't use that in a pejorative sense, normal people would recognize as just incompatible with decency, basic human decency. What you want to do in private, that's your own business. But when you want to bring it out into the public square, especially when you want to bring it out for the purpose of putting it in front of children, You crossed a line. Now you've been called on it. Now there's an actual law in effect saying, nope, this is where the line is. This is where the boundary is. Don't cross it. I mean, you can cry me a handful if you want, but it's the right thing to do. And shame on those who pushed this issue to make it where it was necessary to bring the state in the first place. Look, the best morality is the kind that originates within our hearts, that doesn't require statutes to back it up and punish those who transgress it. But the people who are pushing the freak flag, you're the ones who made this happen. So you've reaped what you've sown. Maybe just try backing it off just a little. It's no fun. It's like being stuck next to a schizophrenic on a cross-country bus ride. Nobody is enjoying the ride at this point. Please back it off while you still can. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
A press club are biased all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.